So, I thought I'd talk about the new Total War DLC for Attila Total War, the Charlemagne DLC pack. I know I don't usually talk about DLC or anything vanilla really, I just stick to Ancient Empires most of the time. But I thought I'd kind of look over it and give my opinions and maybe even talk about what we could do with it for Ancient Empires. But I just had a look at it and I found it kind of interesting, and I thought it was, to be honest, really worth a look at. You see, it looks a lot more interesting and less bland, I guess the word would be. I can't really think of any other word, but less bland than Attila. Because the thing with Attila, even though it is a lot better than Rome 2, and I mean this in pretty much every way, I mean, it's a lot less buggy, or at least mostly. The mechanics are better, it has more content, the campaign map is much larger, even if it is not larger in actual kind of like area. The actual detail of it is much better. I mean, even though we get like parts of like Sicily and Greece and things like that, and even like Far East, we don't get as many kind of settlements, which is kind of annoying for what we're trying to do in Ancient Empires, trying to revert it back. But like the amount of detail, say in Spain, is incredible. Like the amount of places there and all the mountains, and it just makes a great atmosphere for a really kind of hard, bitter, attritional slog through Spain. That's going to be fun when we get to that in Ancient Empires. I cannot imagine how difficult it's going to be trying to get through Spain with like 3 legions or whatever. But you see, the thing is, Attila has so much more to offer than Rome 2 does, but the thing is that the time, like the setting, it just doesn't work as well. And I don't know why, but I'm just not that interested in it. I mean, I've put 10 hours at most into vanilla Attila, and even then most of that was just looking to what the campaign would be like when we get into Ancient Empires. So, I mean, I put over 1,000 hours into Rome 2, and yes, a large part of that was also modding it, but it was also really enjoyable. I mean, it took me back straight to, you know, Rome 1 and playing Rome Surrectum 2, which I just put hours and hours and hours into. And I think also the failings of what I felt were for Rome Surrectum 2 are also apparent in Attila. You see, the thing is, the main problem I had with Rome Surrectum 2, as much as I love the campaign, and I love it a lot more than I do Attila, was the fact that after a while it kind of started to get grindy, because the amount of troops the enemy would throw at you, it kind of became impossible to do anything. It was very fun, and I loved the challenge. In Attila, I don't like the challenge. It's not fun. Just slowly watching your empire fall apart isn't as exciting as I first thought it would be. I thought kind of having this whole idea where you have to survive for like 100 turns, is it, something like that, would be really interesting and really fun, you know, kind of having to battle all these different elements that are trying to destroy you and trying to keep everything together and not have it fall apart. I thought that, you know, I thought that'd be a great setting, but when I played it, it wasn't. I mean, take the Western Roman Empire. Yeah, it's interesting to try and piece together everything. You have, like, you know, sanitation that's really bad everywhere. You have problems with, you know, kind of rebellions and public order, and then you have kind of, you know, all these barbarian hordes that just appear out of nowhere and kind of sack your entire lands. And yeah, it's difficult, but it's not enjoyable. It just seems as if the same thing is happening over and over and over again. and there's no real variation at all. Nothing. Not even slightly. Which is why I'm kind of excited about Charlemagne. There's a lot more variation in it, and it's probably a better time period as well. Like the whole idea of it, the map, while being quite small, is incredibly detailed. They say, you know, this is going to be as detailed, or at least nearly as detailed as the main campaign map, but just set in Europe, which is, you know, interesting. I mean, it would be nice if it was bigger, but it serves its purpose, and is going to be interesting, because the whole, like, the mechanics in it, in itself, the mechanics in Charlemagne are a lot more interesting than they are in Attila. While in Attila you have these, you know, raising entire swathes of land, which is entirely, you know, you can just abuse it like anything, and the AI also abuses it like anything. And I'll talk about war weariness in a bit, which I fear is going to be kind of going to go the same way. But the whole idea with Charlemagne, even just the UI itself is just so charming. The whole idea of the stained glass, you know, the traditions with stained glass kind of icons, and then you have the unit cards, which are just like little comical kind of cartoon characters. I just find that so much better than the blandness of Attila. I mean, it says that they're going to have 300 new units in Charlemagne, and I'm not sure about that. I hope they add a bit more depth into their units, because I found that Attila was basically just all barbarians. Even Rome, to an extent, is just barbarians, and there was no real flavour. There was no kind of difference between the factions. They all just seemed the same, apart from some were hordes and some were not. And that was kind of the problem I had with it. Also, the battles are atrocious. I can't stand it. I mean, that's the whole reason I started modding, really, was because I didn't like the battles, and that was in Rome too. Never mind Attila, where they're even worse. I couldn't stand playing the battles in Attila for an hour. Even modding the battles in Attila are awful. I hate it. This is nothing like modding battles in Rome 2. For some reason, nothing seems to work like you'd expect it to. Even though it's basically the same. It's just crazy. It shouldn't be like that, but it is. But with all that, if I put a mod on, then hopefully Charlemagne will still be enjoyable for me. And it comes with a lot of new things. The whole idea of the kingdoms, where if you meet a set amount of specific requirements, or whatever they said specifically, then you manage to create your own kingdom. And I personally am not sure about that. I mean, I didn't even like the idea of renaming settlements in Attila, which you can do, and I'm not quite sure why, because I really like the whole historical aspect. But I guess if people want to do that, then they can do that, and now you have entire kingdoms that you can name, which I guess will make people happier, because you can, you know, entirely customize your own race now, where you couldn't previously, and it sounds kind of interesting. And the whole idea of making kingdoms, I'm not quite sure how that's going to work, but it sounds like it could be an interesting idea. It could be an interesting thing to see. But I'm more interested in the whole idea of these scripted storyline events, these specific faction-based events, which sound very interesting to me, because they're exactly what I want to see in Ancient Empires. I mean, we have talked about it before, and we do really want to try and push this and get it to work. We're not really sure if we have the skills or the manpower to kind of do things like that, and also no one has really ventured into there modding wise, or at least I don't think so, which makes it new ground, which Ancient Empires always seems to be kind of pushing against, which is equal parts interesting and very, very exciting, but also equal parts terribly scary. I mean, it's terrifying, really, because you have no idea what you're doing. You just have to kind of guess, follow what, you know, Creative Assembly have done, hope that it works, but you have no idea because no one else has done it before. But I guess someone always has to be the first. And I'm very glad and proud to be, you know, one of those people, to be pushing into things that no one else has done before. And, you know, these storyline events, these sound so interesting, because even in the Rome 2, you know, well, or at least the Roman era, we wanted to show off some really interesting kind of ideals, such as the like the Cimbri migration. It happened straight after the kind of, well, not straight after, but after the Marian reforms, which were kind of partly based on the fact that the Cimbri had just turned up on their doorstep and they were kind of forced into doing all these new reforms so they could actually deal with them, because they didn't have the manpower or the equipment and things like that. And it's interesting to, you know, say you've just completed the technology upgrade to Marius, or you've just gone into that area which allows you to go, you know, allows you to do the Marian reforms. It kind of, you know, it's a scary period, because you've got the Cimbri coming in and you have to deal with them, which are very large hordes, which at the time you probably won't have kind of any men to deal with it, because we're going to try and see if we can restrict the manpower at that kind of time. So you're gonna struggle. You're going to have to completely overhaul your military system before you can even deal with these two massive hordes that have just appeared on the side of your empire. And then shortly after that, you have all the social wars where the allies, or, you know, the Italian allies, are basically just going to widespread revolt. And things like that sound really interesting to me. If we can get that to work, I'm going to be really happy, and I'm so glad to see CA really making use of that in the Charlemagne DLC. It's something they haven't really ever done. I mean, you have those kind of political events, I guess, in Rome 2, which I really liked. Even though they weren't really done to the, you know, the scale that I would like them, it's something I'd really like to see, you know, say every turn, well, not every turn, every year, sorry, so about 4 turns. Well, at least in Attila and most mods, really. Which, you know, would make it really kind of involving. You'd have some kind of great problem to deal with within your empire or your, you know, your system. And I really hope that CA does me proud on the Charlemagne DLC, because I hope that it's going to be really fun to see these new kind of variations that's going to shape the entire of the campaign, because that sounds much more interesting than than any other Total War kind of campaign before, because it gives you these kind of paths, I guess, to either, you know, go with history or ignore history, and it gives you a little more than just the military kind of side of it. I mean, Total War is mainly just about building buildings so you can make troops and then conquer the world. There is no kind of difficulty trying to, you know, actually govern your provinces most of the time, really. It's as easy as turning up or turning down the tax, you know, revenues. But I like this whole idea of these new kind of events. I really hope that is something that's interesting. And then for the final thing, really, it's just this war weariness. I am very excited about this whole idea, and I hope that we can steal it for Ancient Empires. The only thing I'm worried about is it being abused as much as the raising system is. Because just like the raising system, the player obviously is going to be able to abuse it in, you know, in the fact that if their public order is really high, then they can just declare war on anyone they really want, and then the AI would just not be able to deal with it and collapse. And also, the AI would also be able to abuse it, really, because the AI very rarely declares peace, which is what I'm worried about. If the campaign AI is changed and diplomacy is changed so that the AI are more likely to declare peace after like a set period of time, then I would be fine with that. That would be fine. That sounds, you know, it doesn't sound like something that's going to really break the campaign. But I am really worried that if they don't do it properly, and CA tends to have this history of having really good ideas but not really going the whole way through them. Like, it is a really good idea. I love the whole idea of wariness, but I'm worried that they haven't entirely thought it through. And even though I don't know this yet, I really hope they change the diplomacy AI, because otherwise it's going to be really broken. And that's just not, that's going to pretty much ruin the entire DLC, because if you have, you know, 6 factions who will never ever stop being at war with you, it's going to reduce your public order, basically make all of your armies turn against you, and it's going to make it impossible. So if they don't do it properly and edit the diplomacy AI, then it's going to ruin the entire DLC, really, because it's going to make it unplayable. And I very much hope that they do make sure that they fix the diplomacy AI before they just, you know, put it in and don't really think about it. Or at least, if they do, then enough people complain about it that they'll patch it within the first month. Because otherwise, it's gonna waste that DLC, and that's a real shame. Because the Charlemagne DLC looks really, really interesting, and I really want it to succeed. I don't want it to fall flat on its face, but I'm worried that it might. I'm just hoping that it doesn't. And there's the problem, you see, because this the war weariness is what I'm most worried about it. The battles are annoying, but they can be patched with modding. So I guess can the diplomacy AI. But of course the war weariness is something that's probably not going to be that moddable. It's going to be scripting, and most people don't know how to script. I mean, we've only just recently got our own scripter for Ancient Empires, and it's like a godsend. I mean, we can do almost anything now that we couldn't do before. We have so many more options than we did, and being predominantly pretty much a 3-4 man team for most of the time that we've been together, it's very, very nice to have all these people come and support us, and especially after the modding awards, like the amount of people who voted for Ancient Empires when it's not even out, and it was like a version that hasn't been updated in half a year probably. Just seeing the amount of people who vote for it just on the fact that it is Ancient Empires and not to do with really anything else, it really opened my eyes. Like, we were the top 6 of the player's choice, and I didn't even realise Ancient Empires was that popular yet. We haven't even got, you know, we're not anywhere near release. I mean, I would like to say that we get release around kind of Warhammer time, the time that Warhammer releases, but it's not certain. I mean, we've still got a lot to do, and we have a very, very grand like scale of our ideas. I mean, we have more and more ideas every day that we just kind of really, really want to put in it. And like, seeing the amount of support that we actually have was really kind of humbling to me. It was so nice to see that, and I really want to make sure that we kind of deliver on that. But yeah, I also really, really kind of want to add in war weariness into Ancient Empires. I think it's going to be really fun to see kind of these barbarian factions that kind of have an initial want for war, have an initial kind of reaction where they really, really want to, you know, get stuck into fighting and have all this kind of morale that they have, and have a nice happiness bonus at the beginning, but then slowly over time, you know, predominantly barbarian factions are kind of levies. Most of the people fighting are normally farmers, and so is, you know, like early Rome, and so, you know, all these factions without kind of professional soldiers. And it'd be nice to see this kind of problem with, you know, public happiness and army integrity really affect them. So that, you know, you have to be much more careful about how you approach kind of warfare and campaigning, and actually trying to crack down so that the player really has, you know, these proper campaign seasons, which is something I've really wanted to, you know, show off for a fair long while. I mean, the whole idea of Ancient Empires is to really kind of create a realistic sense of campaigning. The scope of everything that we want to do is amazing, and this Charlemagne DLC has a lot of things that I want to steal from it. But in and of itself, the DLC is going to be fun to play, as long as it's not broken. And I really, really, really hope that it isn't, and I beg CA to make sure that diplomacy is working before you put this out, because otherwise it's really going to ruin it. But yeah, that is all I have to say, and I hope I haven't been too boring or completely, you know, not understandable. I hope you've enjoyed listening to me babble on about things in a slightly coherent manner.